We're back out here at the Big Lake once again, and today we're looking at some often overlooked baits and presentations in the wintertime, even though they're perfect for winter conditions and they catch tons of fish. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. There we go, I got him. That's a tank. Holy crap, that's a tank. Oh my goodness. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And if you saw the last video, we did a deep dive into all things jerkbait. And jerkbaits are a great tool in the wintertime. We went into all the different ways that you could fish them, different depths, different styles, and that's because jerkbaits just work. But there are often other families of baits that work nearly as well in the wintertime, sometimes better given certain situations, than jerkbaits do. And those are some of the ones that I wanted to focus on this time. You know, they're baits that you've probably heard of and that obviously you know about, but you're not using them right now because, well, you're fishing a jerkbait, right? Everybody's fishing a jerkbait. And like I said before in the video I did recently, I'm not saying don't take the jerkbait off. I'm saying let's change things up. Let's vary things a little bit to keep those fish guessing because, you know, they get attuned to what everybody's throwing really quickly. And the object is always show them something different. Try to be the only person on the lake showing them what you are showing them the way you are doing it and doing it in an enticing manner. And that being said, I want to talk about a group of baits today, a family of baits. Now, when we mean family of baits, we're talking something like lipless crankbaits, right? Or soft plastic worms. We all know that those are a group. Or even something like a jig, like a skirted jig, right? When I say I'm flipping a jig or I'm dragging a jig, you know I'm talking about an arky jig, a flipping jig, a football jig, a swim jig, something along those family, right? Something along those lines. Well, there is another group of baits that are super effective in the wintertime. I use them all the time, and you've seen me use them and talk about them, but I want to do a deep dive into those baits today and kind of break down exactly how, when, where, and why I'm using them. So maybe give you a better understanding of how to break things up. You know, jerkbaits are great, but sometimes you got to put the jerkbaits down and try something else. Even if the jerkbait is working, you know, but you've got to kind of adapt with the conditions. Now, what am I talking about? Well, we're going to talk about this guy right off the bat, right? You've heard me talk about a flutter spoon. This is a 4-inch, 3/4 ounce Strike King Sexy Spoon, and it's on a heavy duty setup. This is a heavy power rod with a fast action tip. I've got 20-pound fluorocarbon on this with a 7.5-to-1 bait cast reel. When I'm fishing offshore and I'm fishing for suspended bass out deep, this is what I'm using. You've got a lot of guys who are using blade baits, which are amazing fish catching tools. And you've got a lot of guys who are using jigging spoons. Again, they work very well, especially up north. But I'm trying to target those suspending fish, which on cold winter's day, you know, let's face it, a lot of times those fish will be suspended. They're not going to be along the bottom and they're not going to be so much on the top. And a flutter spoon is great for doing that out deep. So that's what I'm using whenever I'm fishing deeper water and I'm fishing strong current, strong wind, right? There's a lot of wind out there. I'm going to be pulling out that flutter spoon. So those are the conditions we're going to be working with. It doesn't matter if it's sunny. It doesn't matter if it's cloudy. I'm talking about windy days. And, well, there's going to be a theme here and see if you can pick up on it because the next bait, well, we're talking a little bit more about intermediate waters. Something that's a little bit closer to the bank, maybe something that's going to be a little bit more shallow. If I'm fishing a spoon in, say, 25 or 30 feet of water, I'm going to be fishing this in maybe 10 to 15 feet of water. And again, this is going to be along current seams. This is going to be targeted, if I can, targeted casts along edges and along laydowns, but it's going to be in that deeper water, and that's going to be a spinnerbait, right? Something like a spinnerbait. And not just a spinnerbait, but also something like a bladed jig. These two, to me, are not really interchangeable, but they very much work hand in hand. I've got a Berkley slobber knocker here, and I've got a Googan Zinger. And I will switch these out basically just to change things up. I will work this, close to the bank sometimes if I've got like a deeper bluff wall, or if I've got some laydowns that are working there, right? If I've got a laydown that's laying across in the water and it's extending out into some deeper water, I will run this out there by it. If I've got a grass line, a hydrilla line that's coming out in maybe 8, 10, 12 feet of water, I will run that by there. And I will do virtually the same thing with this bladed jig. One this size, anything that's in a 3/8 or like this one here, a 1/2 ounce size, I will run this in a little bit deeper water. I'll work it in that intermediate range. Again, I'm looking for some current. I'm looking for some wind. Now, if I'm fishing a little bit closer to the bank, if I'm fishing just a little bit shallower, say a little bit shallower flat, then I'm going to be going down to something like this right here. And this is, you can see this is a 1/4 ounce. This is a homemade bladed jig, but something like, just a regular chatterbait, a 1/4 ounce size should do you just fine as you get more shallow. Because as we've talked about before, whenever you're fishing deeper, you want a heavier bait to keep that bait down in the water column. If you are fishing for bass that are suspended, 15, 20, 25 feet or more down, right? You want to be able to keep that bait in the strike zone. You want to be able to keep it there. Because with spinner baits and bladed baits and things of that nature, the faster you work it, the more rise it'll have, the more lift it will definitely have. Any bait, unless it's like, a build crankbait or something like that, but any bait like a swim bait or a spinner bait or a bladed jig or anything like that is going to rise in the water column the faster you work it. Because, even if you've got a trailer on it, right, especially if you've got like a boot tail or paddle tail trailer on the end of it, that kicking action is going to create lift as it creates drag in the water. But that's why we want to fish heavier lures out deep, lighter lures up shallow. Because whenever we're fishing up shallow, well, we want to be more subtle, especially in the wintertime. So weight is key, right? So if I'm fishing this 1/2 ounce bladed jig, or if I'm fishing a 1/2 ounce or 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, I'm doing it in a little bit deeper water. Now, if I'm going way offshore, again, I'm going to be using that 3/4 ounce, even up to 1.5 ounce spoon, depending on how deep in the water column I'm trying to get. Now, I'm trying to stay as small and as light as I possibly can. So work the lightest you can, but still be able to get down in that water column, which is why I prefer a 1/2 ounce or a 3/8 ounce bladed jig or spinnerbait. I find that those work best for me. And when I'm really deep, like I said, something like a 3/4 ounce spoon. I don't like to go above that unless I really, really have to, because paring down your presentations, that's really the key in the wintertime. And we've talked about it a whole bunch of times before, haven't we? Especially in the winter. A smaller presentation, paring down that presentation, can often mean the difference between interest to that fish or the fish not taking interest in it at all, especially when you're putting it right there in front of their face. Now, for a reaction bite, you may have a little bit more wiggle room, but even then, it's not going to be a great amount. So speaking of paring down the baits to the smallest we can possibly get them, here is the last that I want to talk about. You guys remember one of these? This is something I've never shown on the channel before, but this is one of my secret weapons, a beetle spin. I've been throwing beetle spins since I was a kid, fishing the Fox Chain of Lakes outside of Chicago. And this is a teeny tiny little one. I don't even think this is an 1/8 ounce, but they go, 16th ounce, 32nd ounce. And up near the bank, up near shallow water, shallow cover, if I'm fishing laydowns that are right up against the bank, if I'm fishing brush that's overhanging the bank, if I'm fishing under docks, if I'm, fishing in just a couple of feet of water, this right here, well, this is basically my secret mojo. This is how I really take the philosophy of that spinner bait, of that bladed bait, working it really slowly in the wintertime, and then condensing it down to its smallest portion, to its smallest form, and working it around targeted areas. So let's go out on the water and I'll show you exactly what I mean when I'm working with one of these. Okay, now we've got this little beetle spin. This is a 1/8 ounce size, and it's got, I put a little, I guess that's a small little rage grub on there. The smaller size, I think that's 3.5 inch. You don't have to fish the grubs that come with them. You can change those out, which is what I like to do. And what I'm doing with it is I'm making targeted casts along, laydowns, near timber, along grass lines. And I'm staying pretty shallow with it. I'm not going so much out deep. Not with something that light. And the lighter it is, the slower I'm going to work it, because we know that lighter baits tend to rise more in the water column as you work them. Just like that boat, or that fishing pier right there. I can make casts along that, and I can work my bait along through there. And that's what I'm doing. I want to make targeted, specific casts with this little beetle spin. I'm looking for brush piles. I'm looking for overhanging brush to cast near. I'm looking for laydowns to run it along. I'm looking for grass edges, grass seams, those sorts of things. The usual cast of characters that you want to work basically any other type of spinnerbait around. And you just kind of work it nice and slow. I'm not getting in any hurry. I'm just working it nice and slow through there so that I can keep that bait down in the water where I want it to be. Kind of lower in that water column. And around a lot of this wood, around a lot of this timber, it can be really effective, especially, see, we've got vegetation and timber through here. So it's basically just like a bonanza of places you can target, and it's going to stay pretty clean. I mean, you don't want to be throwing it right into the bush, but it'll stay pretty clean. Like I said, I see like that lay down right there. I want to make some casts in that area. I want to make some casts along this pier here. Like I said, targeted casts to work this little bait through. I can even skip it up under there if I want to. And that's kind of what we're looking to do, is we're looking to get a reaction bite from an unwary little bass. I mean, just because it's got a spinner blade on it does not mean you can't skip it up in there. I can make, like I said, I can pop it in there right up under that pier. Oh, that's grass. That's grass, but it felt good for a second. Let me get that gunk. Yeah, that gunk. It came off. Skip it right up under there. Just because it's a little beetle spin, just because it's got a blade on it, does not mean you can't skip it. You can skip just about any bait if you put your mind to it. So it's really not rocket science. You take that little bait and you can work it in different areas just like you would a bladed jig or a spinnerbait. The difference is it's going to be much lighter. You are going to have to work it on spinning gear or BFS if you have it, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to make the cast that you need to make. A lot of times I'm going down to 6-pound test if I have to. Today I'm still working the 10-pound braid, but I've got a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader on here. It gives me a little bit more distance on the cast, especially when I was able to put the wind at my back, but it also allows this bait to ride a little bit lower in the water column. These want to really come up because of how light they are, so you've got to work these really, really slowly. So keep them on your spinning combos, your BFS gear, your light finesse tackle. That's going to be what works best for you. I've got this 7-foot medium light rod here. That's what I've got this tied on. It's got a moderate tip, so I can really lean into that bite if I need to. I'm not snatching when I'm setting the hook. I'm leaning into it because I don't want to rip this little bait out of that bass's mouth. I want to give that hook a chance to do its job. I want that bass to come up, inhale that bait, and I want to be able to lean into it, usually with a side sweep, right? I'm not snatching it really hard like I would with a Texas rig. So, but like I said, don't overlook a beetle spin. When's the last time you fished a beetle spin? I'm telling you what, break it out, give it a try, and you'll be surprised at just how effective they are. People use them for crappie in the summer, but I'm telling you what, they are amazing for bass in the winter. So there you have it. A great way to take advantage of the windy winter weather. Those bladed baits are perfect for wintertime conditions, and even things up to a beetle spin, which nobody else is throwing. Like I said, it's a crappie bait in the summertime, but you can use it as a bass bait in the winter. Try these out, experiment with them a little bit, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a good bit of success. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.